Hi guys, it's Misty from the Book Rat, and today I wanted to do a quick review of two recent audiobooks that I've read, listened to. The Last Namsara and Fiendish. Both of these I listened to on Hoopla, which I cannot recommend enough. Ready for my February credits to restart. So since these are both audiobooks, I'm going to review them as books and as audio. I'm going to leave the links and synopses for both books in the description so you can find out more about them there. I'm not going to waste too much time on a synopsis in the video because it's just not necessary. It's right down there. Just go click it. And I'm going to get straight into it with The Last Namsara, which I just loved. I had been seeing this book everywhere all of a sudden. Had pretty much no idea what it was about, but then it popped up in the featured books on Hoopla, and just on a whim I was like, okay, sure, that one, whatever. Turns out it's about dragons and a general badass woman. I can totally see why everyone loves it. Now, I'm gonna just preface this whole video by saying I always feel like when I'm listening to an audiobook, I don't know what my response would be to it if I were reading it, because I feel like you do process things and interpret things differently, and as evidenced by the fact that every time I say I don't like a book, everyone says, try it on audio. Audio can make up for flaws in the story because you have not only whatever's going on in the story, but a performance that might be stellar enough to kind of carry it through and make the bad parts seem not so bad. So, I mean, maybe if I had read these, I wouldn't like them as much. I don't know. I doubt that, though, because I really, really did like both of these. Spoiler. For The Last Namsara, I think one of the strengths, I mean it has a lot of strengths, one of the strengths really is in the world building though. It felt very real and fully realized. There was a history, there's a weight of history, which I think is really crucial in fantasy, and is something that, when I don't like a fantasy, it tends to kind of come down to something like that, not feeling like it's really rooted, that it's grounded in past, in a backstory. So when you're giving someone a totally different world, you need to feel that it's not just floating there. It needs to feel like things have led to this point, and it really does feel like things have led to this point. The story is interspersed with bits of mythology and stories from the past, from the main character's ancestors, or just dealings with the dragons in general, her homeland, different rulers, things like that. And it really acts as this thread that runs through that gives you a process, a step-by-step of how we've gotten to the point where we are now. And I really appreciated that. Beyond that, those stories, those steps, influence who the main character is and the actions she takes, and I think that is another thing that is often neglected in fantasies that I don't like. The characters really need to feel like an accurate representation of the world that has been built, and when they don't, it just kind of ruins your suspension of disbelief and makes the whole thing seem a little more, I don't know, fluff, I guess. It just feels like it's not there, you know. It needs to be worked a little bit more and melded a little bit more, and I didn't feel that at all with this. I think not only the main character, but the periphery characters, they all felt like they really did belong to this world and were authentic to what was going on. The language felt believable and accurate to the world, and wasn't too much, wasn't overdone, so that with each new word you're like, oh my god. You know, it wasn't that at all. Just all of the kind of hallmarks of what make a good fantasy work were there in this, and were really enjoyable. Beyond that, beyond the kind of mechanics of the story and bringing this world to life, it was just an enjoyable story. I think the main character is bold and root-forable, and even though there is, you know, the pretty obvious love interest and pretty obvious villains, things like that, there feels like enough kind of thought on her part, on the main character's part, that you kind of don't just dismiss it as, you know, oh, another insta-love or another obvious villain or something like that. Like, it feels like enough of a part of her world and her thought process and what influences her actions and who she is, and it all really melts together so nice. I just really enjoyed it. I think it also works really well as a standalone. I realized when I finished it that it's supposedly going to be a series, according to Goodreads, which has it listed as Iskari #1, so I imagine that it's going to keep going, but it really does work on its own as a standalone if you're not into series, or you just want something that, you know, feels complete. It's really well done. I got to a point where I thought, well, this is going to be book 1, we're going to end here, and then it's going to go into this. And it didn't. It actually has this main first storyline that kind of gets wrapped up, moved on into the bigger storyline seamlessly, without it feeling too long, and without it feeling like something's being dragged out so there could be a cliffhanger. Like, it just feels like a nice, complete package. Before I move on to Fiendish, I'll give you a little taste of the audio as I kind of talk about what I liked and what I didn't.
Asha lured the dragon with the story. It was an ancient story, older than the mountains at her back, and Asha had to dredge it up from where it lay deep and dormant inside her. She hated to do it. Telling such stories was forbidden, dangerous, even deadly.
Ugh, that narration, man. That is some good narration. I really hope that they keep that same narrator for future books, because I will absolutely be listening to them. Her voice was just like smoky honey. Loved it. Except for some of the kind of more villainous characters or less likable characters, she made the same choice every time, which was to make them a little nasally, a little whiny, and very, very heavy on vocal fry, which I just wasn't a fan of. So that wasn't my favorite. I wanted to kind of move past those characters every time they kind of came on, but the rest of it, the narration is lovely. As an audiobook, I would definitely recommend it. I think I felt really immersed in the story and loved that voice in my ear. Occasionally, it's a little hard to understand some of the words just based on her accent. She can tend to run some words together and make them a little bit, harder to catch, but that was very occasionally, and for the most part, beyond those few small things, loved it. Across the board, stellar audio. So that's my thoughts on The Last Namsara. Moving on to Fiendish by Brenna Yovanoff. I don't know what has made me wait so long to listen or read Fiendish, because I love Brenna Yovanoff. I also have Paper Valentine on my shelves, and it will be read next month, because listening to this has made me want to go back into her worlds. Now, if you've read Brenna Yovanoff before, you probably will know if you're going to like this or not, because there is certainly the same sort of style and themes to all of her works that I've read, and I don't mean that in any kind of redundant way, but just if you liked other ones, The Replacement or Paper Valentines, this one, anything else she's written, then you'll probably like this one. If you didn't like them, maybe you won't. For me, I love the worlds and the characters that she builds. There's a sort of Southern Gothic thing that she has going on, mixed with some urban fantasy and maybe a little magical realism, but just a touch, and a dash of contemporary romance and a dash of coming of age. It's just all kind of melded into these really atmospheric and gorgeous stories. I love the worlds. I love the characters. It was so nice to kind of fall back into her style. I actually have her on Goodreads listed as one of my authors to watch. When I add her books to Goodreads, it's always on authors to watch, because for me, she is one of those. She's one of those kind of auto-buy, auto-listen to, auto-recommend authors, because I just gel with her style. Some people won't. Some people don't like that sort of urban fantasy, slightly gothy, Southern Gothic thing. I get that. If it's not your thing, then, maybe skip Fiendish, but if you like those things, highly recommend. There were, a few drawbacks every now and then. The end, I think, felt a little bit rushed and a little bit abrupt, and if I could have changed something about the end, I'm not gonna spoil it, I would have, just because I didn't want it to go that way. I wanted a slightly different resolution, although I understood why it got the one that it did, and figured it was probably going there. Beyond those kind of baubles at the end, I just enjoyed being in this world, and this magic system, and the sort of small town vibe that it had, and how that plays out. Like, there was just a lot. It hits a lot of the sweet spots for me. I feel like it's a very, easy read or easy listen. It moves along. It kind of invites you in. It's not something that you're going to have to, dwell on or take time to process and mull over. It's just good, interesting, slightly creepy, slightly spooky story, well told. Now, as for the telling, I did like the narration. Let me go ahead and play a little snippet.
The Last Day, Chapter 1. When I was little, everything twinkled. Trees and clouds all seemed to shine around the edges. At night, the stars were long tails of light, smeared across the sky like paint. The whole county glowed. Back then, my life was mostly pieces, tire swings and lemonade, dogwood petals drifting down and going brown in the grass.
So as you can see, there is a southern accent in this, so if you don't like accents in your narrations, maybe you want to skip it. The other thing that's kind of a hallmark of this narration is there's a breathiness, and as it kind of develops, it goes from being kind of slow, honeyed, lazy summer day narration to having always like a slight note of panic. And I don't think that's entirely dependent on the story. It's just a narration choice that was made that the main character sounds like she's always on the verge of, like, panic. And that doesn't always quite work. You know, it might kind of bother you, or it might seem, I don't know, just a little much. But for the most part, I actually really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the character, I guess, that she gave to the character. She does a really good job, I think, of differentiating between the different speaking characters in the story. I feel like they are all very unique enough that you know who's speaking, and distinctive enough that you know specifically who is speaking. I felt like the southernness and the style that she gives to it helped kind of amp up that aspect of the story, so I really liked listening to it on audio. I think I would enjoy it just as much if I had read it, but I think it did kind of added a little layer, having that Southern Belle narration style, so for me it worked, but those are some things that might put other listeners off, so just kind of know that going in. But it is very engaging, and I really enjoyed it across the board. So, pretty straightforward and slightly quick for 2 reviews, I think. Don't know for sure. But that is my thoughts on The Last Namsara by Kristen Ciccarelli. I don't think I ever said that. And Fiendish by Brenna Jovanoff. If you would like a bonus review of something that didn't work out for me so well, I also just posted a review of The Trader's Game to my blog. And I had some issues. With it. I think so many people are gonna love it. That bothered me a little bit. But I talked quite a bit. If you'd like a nice 1,000-word essay on everything that is wrong with the Trader's Game, I feel like I stepped up to that challenge. So I will leave a link to that in the description, as well as links and synopses for both of these books, all down in that little clickable down bar. But that is all for this video. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments if you have read or been wanting to read either of these books, or if you have some audios that you recommend, because I am like on an audiobook kick. I am loving them right now. So let me all know all of that in the comments. But until next time, happy reading.